Hey everybody and welcome back. For those of you looking to build a budget gaming PC or just a gaming PC in general, stay tuned. I'm going to be walking through everything I did to get this PC here. We're going to be covering the entire build, all the parts, receipts, and pricing and everything in this video. So before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe and check out the channel for new content. Now, I will be going over the Cinebench scores in a bit, but the way the video is going to be broken down, and I do apologize if it's shaky, I'm off of the tripod right now. What we're going to do is we're going to start with an overview of the device itself, then I will jump into screen sharing to show all of the receipts and prices, then I will jump into the build portion of the video, which will be the largest portion, then we will finish off with the Cinebench scores here. But just going over the device itself, so you'll see we have the case, which is brand new, and that was purchased on Amazon. I'll have a link in the description. We have two 200mm fans in the front. We have one 120mm fan in the back, and then we have the aftermarket CPU cooler. So that and the case are the only two parts that were purchased brand new. Everything else was used, including the power supply unit and the GPU. So going into specs, we have starting off, we have 8 gigs of RAM. We have, so it's the two 4 gig sticks. We also have the i7, it's the 4790, and that is paired with the GeForce GTX 970 SSC. And again, we have a 725 watt power supply, which you can see here. And other thing to note is we have the RGB fans set up so we can actually control all of the lighting and colors and things like that from the remote here. And you'll see it's also syncing with the CPU cooler fan. And we can set it to auto just to go into this mode here. It does look like the CPU fan spinning in reverse as far as the lighting is concerned, but outside of that, again, you can just set whatever you want here. And everything is working. So let's go ahead and jump into the screen share and we can show the actual parts list and the pricing in more detail. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do a quick screen sharing and walk through all of the links where you can purchase these items. And then I'm also going to show the receipts for all of the purchases just so you can actually see how the pricing comes out. I did do the math on everything excluding the operating system, and it ended up being just under $330, so right around $329-ish. Now, a couple of things to note, because I did end up with two processors, so the motherboard I bought came with an i3. I will be able to sell that for the cost equivalent of other parts. So what I mean by this is everything that I got includes a couple of free items, like a power supply unit I got on Mercari, a couple of coupons that I got to get a free item at Micro Center, like a solid state drive. Now, in the event that you aren't able to do that, you should be able to do something similar. You could buy cheaper cases, or you could purchase parts in a similar manner to me and then sell parts to offset the cost. So I do think a $330 to $350 price tag for this is more than capable of it being achieved by most people. So let's go ahead and jump straight in. So we have the case here. I'm on the fence about this and I'll explain why later in the video. I had some issues with the LEDs in the front in the beginning, but after restarting the device, everything seems to be working, and I kind of unplugging it, plugging it back in. So I guess we'll see on that one. I still think it's a solid case. The reason I think this is a good deal is not the initial price, but the fact that the shipping is free. Shipping seems to be one of the biggest costs associated with the actual cases because they are so large. So it's not just the fact that it's $75 or so, it's $75 all in. Next up, we have the fan here, which is the CPU cooler. The price did go up on this a bit, so you may be able to find a better deal or wait for the price to go down just a bit. But one thing to note on these two, I did try to get new parts when possible, primarily because it was hard for me to find a gaming PC case that was in good condition, that didn't have incredibly high shipping. So that's kind of the reason for that. So here's the CPU cooler. And then we have some SATA cables. I want to make sure that you see exactly everything that went into this device. Then we also have a Kingston solid state drive here, which is 480 gigs. Then we have the Wi-Fi adapter, and then an Intel Core i7. And this one actually, I believe when you purchase this, some of the benefits go to charity if I'm not mistaken. Now, the only thing that I am missing is there was a power cable that I plugged into the power supply unit, which was around $7 at Walmart. So I did leave that off. So that does bring the total price of the computer still under $340. Now we're going to minimize this and show the receipts for everything except that extra cable. And again, the primary reason for that is
just because it was purchased at Walmart as like a one-off. So you'll see for this one here, for the Wi-Fi adapter, it was $10.59, $27.55 total for the Kingston solid state drive. Now the boot drive is the one that I got from Micro Center for free. It was a really generic coupon, and I've seen them online for a lot of, new introductory offers for new customers. So you may have a computer store near you where you could pick up something similar, but that drive was not required. It was just a benefit because typically with gaming builds, you'll have a smaller, faster drive that is designed for the operating system. And then to cut costs, you would get a larger, maybe like a 7200 RPM hard disk drive or solid state, or for some people, those M.2 drives. Now, next up, we have the $741 for the SATA cables, as well as the cost of $31.79 for the CPU cooler. As you can see, it is lower than the current Amazon listing. We have the gaming computer case, which is $77.37. The CPU after tax was $51.94. And then the Kingston HyperX Fury, so this is the 8 gigs of RAM, so 4 gigs. It's DDR3. This is the one that came with the i3 and the motherboard. So basically we got the motherboard, an i3 with a stock cooler, and 2 4-gig sticks of RAM for $66.96. You could probably find some better deals potentially online, but I found that the motherboard combos tend to be a pretty good deal and a really easy way to offset your costs if you buy a motherboard CPU combo, because most people upgrade both of those together. So you could probably find the motherboard CPU combo and then sell the old CPU and upgrade. So I have an i3 that I can now sell. And then lastly, we have the powerhouse of the computer, which is the EVGA GeForce GTX 970 SC. This was an amazing deal. So $55.44. The thing came in great condition. Obviously, you're going to want to make sure that you're vetting the supplier of the GPUs, make sure that they weren't tested and used too heavily. But overall, this is all of the prices for the build itself. So now we can jump into actually building it out now that the parts have arrived.
All right, so what we need to get started has come in. So we have the motherboard, which actually just came in. So you'll see we have the 2 4-gig sticks of RAM right here. And then it has what I guess we'll just call the stock i3. So it's a relatively new one. I mean, not within the last couple of years. So I'm going to be upgrading that to, I believe it's an i7 4790, which should have integrated graphics if that comes in before the graphics card does. But at least right now we have the case opened up. We have the remote control for the fans. So again, the 120 millimeter and then the 200 millimeter. Then we have all the screws and all the parts, some of which are already set up. So we're going to go ahead and get the motherboard mounted in. Then we will work to get wiring run and see what steps are left after that based on what parts arrive. All right, so we have the motherboard mounted in. It took a little bit longer just because some of these screws, you probably won't be able to see it, but there were a few of these when I focus in. When I was putting the motherboard into the case, some of the screws, it almost felt like you had to start threading it with one screw, take that screw out, and then replace it with another one because it was damaging the threads on the screws. Kind of a weird situation, but there were more than enough. As you can see, I have couple extras left over. So basically this has been mounted. So next up we are going to be installing the free SSD that we got from Micro Center with a coupon, and then we will be installing the Kingston. This is a 480 gig, so both are SSDs, and then we do have the Wi-Fi adapter here, just like a standard USB Wi-Fi adapter. Again, I'll have the parts list down in the description, so we're gonna keep moving forward getting all of these hooked up. All right, so we now have the power supply unit that I got for free from a seller on Mercari when I bought a graphics card for a different computer. So that's been installed. Basically just put a couple screws in the back, and then we have the wires hanging out the back hand side. I may end up having to unscrew the motherboard. It was not the smartest idea to mount that down first, but I thought I might have enough clearance on the side to get everything hooked up that I would need to. But I don't see the standard plastic housings that some cases have on this one to install the SSDs. So what I'm going to try to do is basically mount them on the back of the case, and that way it's not going to be visible from the front, but I don't see the plastic housings or cases on the back either. So it's just going to have to be mounted that way for now. So I'm going to go ahead and get that taken care of. All right, after going through the case a little bit more, it seems like the best option for now, at least, we do have the SSD that's going to be the boot drive right here. And then on the opposite side, although there are none of the typical like plastic chassis that you would see for the SSDs, there was a metal piece that I was able to take out and reverse that is designed for the solid state drives. So that's where the Kingston drive, which is the larger one for games, is going to be mounted on the back. It does make cable management, which obviously we're not done with plugging everything in yet, but it's going to make that a little bit more challenging because I did have to rip this off, which was using they put it on with a 3M adhesive or some kind of similar product, so obviously you don't want to go ripping that off and putting it on multiple times, but it's nice to see a controller there for that. So we're going to go ahead and get the wires hooked up for the rest of the power and everything else to the motherboard. All right, so at this point, we're able to get something on the screen. We have hooked up everything. Now we do have the red arrow light right there, which should just mean we don't actually have anything on our boot drive. So again, we haven't installed Windows yet, which we're going to be doing in just a minute. So I have my other computer over here. Basically, we are going to boot in, go ahead and get a Windows installer on a flash drive. But for this, just wanted to show the lights really quickly, which are surprisingly cool. So you can change the colors with this remote here. And then it has an option for auto so that you can go into this like RGB mode. You can turn them off, and you can also, when you turn them on, so if you select, let's just say, we'll choose on, and then you have the option to, I don't really know what S plus or minus does, but it has an effect of some kind, so it looks like it's doing kind of like I don't want to call it a shader, but kind of like fading in and out. We have the other options here, and then you also have what looks like a brightness up and down, but I guess that's not what it's actually doing. If you know what these modes are, feel free to drop it in the comment box, but just wanted to show you at the very least at this point, everything is working as expected, and I do definitely like the fans and effects. It is pretty cool. So we're going to keep going and go ahead and get Windows installed on this device. Alright, so I'm at the Windows 10 Media Installer website. So this is actually Microsoft's website. If you don't know, you can just Google how to install Windows 10 from a flash drive. I'm not opting for Windows 11. I don't want to run into any compatibility issues with Windows 11 and older processors and hardware, etc. So we're going to go ahead and download Windows 10 to a flash drive and then get that hooked up and go through the install process. Alright, now this part is for educational purposes only, but basically just want to show a couple of options for getting a Windows 10 key. Now, if you're interested, you can check out scdkey.com. There is an affiliate program, so I will drop the affiliate code in the link of this video or in the description. But while the Windows 10 USB media is installing, again, that's the official one from Microsoft. If you're interested, you can check out scdkey.com using the link in the description. Again, prefacing, I'm not endorsed by them in any way, but the affiliate program does get usually you a discount, and then I'll get a little bit of money as well. So again, if you have any questions, you can check out their site. They have other keys for other versions of Windows, and they sell different products and games as well. So if you're interested, check out the site. But again, I just preface by saying this part in particular is for educational purposes only. Alright, so we have our flash drive and everything hooked up. I just turned the computer on. We see all the fans are spinning. So at this point, again, we have two empty SSDs. One is mounted in there in the front. The other one's on the back. So at this point, we are just going to load up the boot menu. So basically, we're pressing F1 to enter the BIOS. You'll see we have F8 to enter into the boot menu. And then we are choosing the very last option, which is going to boot into our, basically just the flash drive, which has that Windows 10 installer we were just setting up. So at this point, we have the Windows 10 installer will be loading. I'm not going to record that entire process, but basically we have the device booting into this flash drive. We'll get Windows 10 installed. It's basically just going through the typical prompts. We just want to make sure that everything loads as expected. So this can usually take, I would say, probably 1 to 2 minutes, maybe a couple minutes max. But it was the very last flash drive option, not the second to last, even though they are technically the same device, for those of you that may have some confusion there. So what we'll be doing is we have a 240 gig solid state drive that we got from Micro Center for free using a coupon. So we will be using that for Windows, and then the other drive will just basically be formatting and be using for games. So you'll see right here we are able to load into the Windows menu. I was not smart enough to plug in a mouse, so basically I'm just going to go through the install with the keyboard, but everything's working, so we'll get Windows 10 installed and then see what's next. All right, so everything booted up correctly, and we have the new i7 coming in today. So I've gone ahead and pulled off the stock cooler. We have the new cooler here, so you can see we have our RGB fan, and then fairly large heat sink, and all the mounting hardware, which also includes a little thing of thermal paste. So this is what it's ideally going to be looking like when we're all finished. So we'll go ahead and get this set up, basically get what we can, and then just get the i7 hooked up, and then see if we can kind of test the system. And then the last thing we're waiting on is the graphics card. So the GTX 970 came in. You'll see the model is the EVGA GeForce GTX 960 SSC. I was surprised. This was in really good condition. Got it on Mercari for around $50. It did have the original plastic tape on here. Looked like from the factory, so I was able to pull that off, so you can see pretty much no signs of wear and tear. We do have the 4 and 3 pin connectors for power here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is get this set up and installed. We're waiting on the i7, which should be here within the next hour or two. So I'm just trying to get things moving as quickly as possible. Now, we do have a guard on the back of this case that sits essentially right here, just to basically just allow a kind of like a minimize gaps for where all the components from the GPU will be coming out. So what we're going to be doing at this point is really just setting this up. So one thing I'm not a huge fan of about this case is, we'll turn it around just a bit here. So we don't have much to work with on these sides here. It looks like we're literally popping them out. So it looks like the metal, instead of having individual pieces where we're just going to unscrew them, you actually move them back and forth until these two little metal pieces snap off. So you're pretty much just pulling the entire thing off. And from what I'm seeing here, there's no way to put this metal piece back. So if at any point you decided, okay, I need to take out all of them, and then decided, oh, wait, I need to put some back, you're probably gonna have to buy additional parts for that, unfortunately. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is try to get this seated. So we're gonna have it seated a little bit lower just to see how we can get everything else set up inside the computer. So we know we're gonna need it right around here, and we're going to need 2 slots. So we're just gonna guess and essentially start pushing things through. So again, not a big fan of this type of case when they're doing something like this, but it was on the more affordable end, so I guess I can't complain too much. So we are going to feed this in. We have the power cables that have already been run through from the last bit of work that we were doing. So we are just pushing in, waiting for that satisfying click noise, which we just heard. And then at this point, we have to run with these cables. The downside is, as this was not a modular power supply unit, the cords, they are what they are, and you get what you get. So in this case, they're a little bit more difficult to work with. So we're going to plug this one in here, which is the 4 pin. And we hear our little click, and now we are going to plug in our 3 pin and then try to find a way to hide all of these. The cables are a little bit stiff and there's not a ton of room to play. So we're getting this one plugged in. So we now have both plugged in. GPU is plugged in. We're going to go ahead and get some screws to get this mounted on this side over here, but the GPU is installed. So we will go ahead and wait on that i7 and get that installed and then wrap things up. So the i7 came in on time. So we have the i7 4790 here. I bought this used over on eBay. They actually have some sellers that donate to charity, so I definitely recommend checking them out. So basically we have the computer on the side here. So what I'm going to do is I will zoom in just a bit, just so you can kind of see how this works. So basically, computer's on its side. Primary reason is we don't want the processor falling out, and we want to make sure, because this is a delicate operation, you don't want to bend any of the pins or anything like that. And really all you're doing is just setting the CPU in. You really just want to make sure that it's guided in and set correctly. So the idea here is, you'll see on each side there are these little metal or these little clips or pins, I guess you would say, and it will basically just fall right into place. Now, I am doing this with parts of the the bracket for the mounting of the CPU fan, which is not recommended, but I'm lazy. So basically you're going to push this metal guard down, and then we have to move our bracket out of the way just a bit. And basically you're just pushing this metal piece down to where it was originally. It clips in right here, and then the CPU is mounted in correctly. So next up, what we're going to be doing is adding or applying thermal paste after we've made sure that it is cleaned up. So this is what came with the processor itself, or I should say with the cooler. So I will just be opening this, and then we will apply as you would expect. So you'll see we have the thermal compound here. Might not be the best brand, but I'm sure it'll be just fine. So a lot of people talk about doing this in different patterns. Some people want to do it in an X, dot, rectangle, square, etc. But really all that I'm going to be doing is I want to test it and just make sure it's not coming out, because this stuff tends to be on the thicker side. I personally like to go with more of a square pattern. And then what we will do is kind of like a smaller square on the inside. And then when you're satisfied with that, we'll zoom out. And I'm just going to add a little bit more because this stuff tends to be a little bit thicker and at times can be a little bit more difficult to apply. So we're just going to go ahead and make sure that we have enough. And then what I would recommend, I've seen there are actually some videos online that show the benefits to applying thermal paste in specific patterns. I just messed that up there. But one of the things I would recommend checking out those videos is you can actually see if you apply this, because it comes out kind of slowly. So if you apply this thermal compound, it's better to evenly spread it before you push the plates or whatever the cooler is over top. So now what we are going to do is I'm going to close off the thermal compound, and I'm not going to apply too much because there's actually some already on the bottom of the cooler here. So now we are going to line up the cooler, and before we do that, we're going actually to tighten up the screws here to make sure that this mounting bracket is tight and is also where it should be. And again, I only loosened up this side here just to make sure that it was easier to take off the processor. So this side's set. We're going to double check on this side because I don't remember tightening this up, and it's always good to double check. You don't want to have too much stress or pressure on the motherboard. These things do tend to weigh quite a bit. All right. Almost there and set. So I would like the fan, basically you want to see how you want to actually have the fan facing, what direction, etc. I like facing with the logo facing out, but you're going to want to set this up to where the airflow is going in the direction that makes the most sense for your case. So this case, we have some ventilation up front and the air is designed to push that way. So we may do some testing with the fan facing different directions. But the general idea, because this one's actually looking like it may be going on essentially facing the opposite way of the other one. However, I would prefer to have the logo facing out. So we'll do some testing and see what it looks like aesthetic wise this way. So I'm going to pop the fan on, make sure that it is secured to the heatsink properly. And next up, what we're going to do, making sure everything's lined up correctly and getting the cord secured, you can basically just get this mounted in. Now, one thing you'll notice for this one, we do have the fan already installed, so we can take the fan off. Luckily, things like this are very easy to do, and you'll need to do that in this case just to make sure that you can get this mounted on correctly, because obviously you can't access the screw for it without actually getting it, hooked up. So we'll go ahead and do that now. So I know I skipped ahead just a bit, but some of this was more of a one-handed operation and I needed to get a longer screwdriver. So what I did here at this point, and in hindsight, this was something I should have recommended. So when it comes to actually putting these coolers on, a lot of the times they're what's pushing down and applying that thermal paste more evenly. So you want to make sure that you're putting it on in a manner where it's actually flush with the CPU. So one of my recommendations, or an option for doing that, is loosening all the mounting brackets. Since I had to take the fan off anyway, I wasn't paying attention and didn't see the screw under here. That was something that I already had to do. So at this point, basically what I did was I loosened up the screws on all sides, made sure the thermal paste was applied, and then I just set this back over top and then basically followed kind of like a diamond pattern for screwing everything back in to ensure that it was getting screwed on more evenly. So everything is now screwed in and mounted, and you'll see I had to remount the fan here, which is not really a problem. And I just tried to make sure that the fan's actually matching the one in the back as far as what would look like the airflow. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take a quick look at the back and show you something I did that you should never do. But this actual motherboard does not have the RGB connections, and instead of just plugging it into some random part of the motherboard, what I did was I had an extension cord / adapter from an NZXT fan from a separate case. So what I ended up doing, this is from the actual fan. So this is from the cooler fan. So we have one plugged into the front, the CPU fan on the motherboard. The other one is this piece right here, which is the RGB connection. So what I did was I took the NZXT adapter that I had and I cut the pin, because they're both 4 pins, but this one actually has one of the pins essentially filled in. So what I did was I cut the pin off of the NZXT connector so that it matches up essentially like a 3-for-3 situation, which again, I would never recommend modifying any of your existing adapters or connectors. It's a really bad idea, but that's what I did here. So now what we're going to do is we have the GTX 970 plugged in, and we have the new i7 hooked up. So we will go ahead and press the on button, watch everything get started. So you'll see the fans for the most part are in sync. And this is also a really good idea when you're using the RGB setup to try to connect it to the same controller if possible, which is the controller for the case. This way, as you can tell, they're all kind of in sync. So we have the HDMI cable plugged in to the 970. We do have the picture out. Now, one thing here is we do get this error message when trying to use really just to start the device itself, and you'll see CPU fan error. In this case, the fan is spinning, and I believe there's a problem with the actual fan header. I plugged it into a different one. So what we're going to do is we're going to press F1, enter the BIOS menu, and set it up to ignore this warning. I saw another video on this, so it's up to you if this is something that you want to do, but basically just clicked advanced mode, and just to show you all of them are synced up color-wise, which is pretty cool. All right, so we are going to go to the monitor tab, and then here you'll see we have CPU fan. We're just going to click ignore, exit EZ mode, save and exit. Okay. And then basically just allow this to restart. And then what we're going to do is we are going to install the really all the drivers for the 970, and then we're going to try to run a benchmark or two just to see how this kind of stacks up. But right now, everything's looking pretty good. You'll see fans are in sync, everything's spinning, everything's running. We are booting into Windows. So the 970 does appear to be working. I do feel some airflow from both fans. You'll see we have everything set up here. So now what we will do, we're going to get logged in. I'll show basically just all this while we're booting up. You'll see it says setting up a device. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to display settings, try to get this set up. Obviously, we want a much higher resolution. We will keep the changes, close this. So at this point, really everything's working. Again, we are using the actual GPU. We don't have anything plugged in to the integrated graphics. So everything's booting correctly. At this point, it's time to go ahead. I'll get the drivers installed, and then we will go ahead and jump into the actual benchmarking. Now, I do want to be transparent. Something that actually just started happening during the actual testing and kind of just finishing off everything. I'm installing SpyBot just to have some kind of basic antivirus. But what I noticed on the front is if I were to set all the lights on just a standard color, you may or may not be able to see it depending on how bright they are, but the entire ring is white. But then we have a couple of lights that randomly start blinking other colors, so we have 2 red ones, 2 yellow ones, but it's only on that one fan. This one is fine, and these are also fine. So I don't know if it's defective wiring or anything else, but now this one up here, we have a yellow light blinking, so the lights just aren't matching up as they should. And I checked the controller. The fans themselves are actually plugged in by default when they arrive, so really all you're doing is plugging in power. So I think that it's either a defective controller or fan, but because Spybot's finished, I'm going to be restarting the computer anyway. So I do want to see if that's something that goes away. Obviously, you could probably get a return or replacement from Amazon. The downside with things like that is now we would have to take everything out, ship it back, or get replacement fans, which is still going to require some assembly and disassembly. But I do at least want to show you everything's gone smoothly up to this point, except obviously the lighting here. So I guess what we can do at this point, I've tried turning it off and on, at least from this perspective of just using the remote, and that doesn't seem to fix anything, so maybe restarting the computer will help. But either way, I did want to show you this just to let you know this is something that I ran into. But again, overall, the auto mode still seems to work relatively well the majority of the time. So I think it's still worth it overall just to have a nice, solid, affordable case. And I could swap it out if I need to. So we have the computer set up here. We're going to do a quick gaming test, so the computer being on the right-hand side. So again, you see everything actually appears to be working. So I had some issues with the lighting, but after restarting and unplugging, everything started to work again. But we will take a quick peek on the inside, so we'll see everything's running. Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to test on Apex Legends just because it's a quick, easy, free game. So I have this hooked up to a 1440p monitor. So what we're going to do is check a couple of settings really quickly, and then I will be using the NZXT, the cam software, to basically just quickly check temperatures and things of that nature. But I went through the training portion with FPS counter on, and I was able to average around 80 FPS. So we're going to test it online a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to video, keep it at full screen. What we'll do is we'll upgrade to 1440p, and then we are going to keep everything else. So you'll see basically what options you have here as far as VSync, adaptive, all that. So I'm just giving you a quick overview of the settings that we're using. So we're just going to try to go as high as possible for everything first, just to see how everything works. And we will keep these changes. So we're now in a 1440p. We have the performance display set up. So what we can do now is just click ready, try to jump into a game really quickly and see what kind of teams or what kind of numbers we can expect when we jump into a game. Alright, so I'll try to have the audio turned down just a bit in the background, but just so you can kind of hear everything. So right now it looks like we're averaging about 65-ish FPS, and honestly pretty smooth gameplay overall. So I'm not going to play too much, just basically want to show you once we kind of touch down. We are running on 8 gigs of RAM. I would like to have at least 16, which I can always upgrade to later. But you'll see it's a pretty smooth gameplay overall. I mean, jumping around and movements are pretty fluid. And really the only thing I think that you can kind of notice is just when the graphics, textures and everything start to appear off in the distance. But again, I think that little optimizations that are more affordable, such as upgrading the RAM, would drastically improve this. But overall, the 970 seems to be working very well. Now, I will turn down the audio a bit because I do want you to hear the computer is a little bit on the louder side, but it's not terribly loud compared to some of the other devices out there. So it's louder than my normal setup. But what we'll do is we'll check the load. So you'll see we were pushing the GPU to around 90% load as I was minimizing, but we are still maintaining around 65-ish degrees, and then the CPU is around 45, 46. I would expect those numbers to climb a bit after some extended gaming sessions, but as far as just general day-to-day going around and just using it, it does have a hiccup here and there, but it's very, very minimal, very rare. So we'll just kind of run through here and show you. Again, don't really plan on actually trying to do anything, but you'll see FPS, again, starting to take a little bit of a dip. We're going between 55 and 65 semi-regularly. It tends to drop a little bit when you're actually in the gameplay, but the fact that we're actually gaming in 1440p is pretty impressive. So, again, FPS I've seen go upwards of 75. Just kind of depends. So what we'll do is I will try to zoom in on the FPS counter a bit just so you can kind of see what to expect as we're kind of moving around doing various things. But that's really all that there is to it as far as I can see. I mean, everything's working pretty well. There are some minor hiccups here and there. But again, if we were to minimize this, so NZXT, the cam software will appear right here. And you'll see that first thing that we see when the window is minimized is, in my opinion, a relatively accurate depiction of what we're expecting. So we're seeing temperatures closer to 70 degrees now that the game's actually been running for a bit. So I think it's probably safe to say that we could get potentially in the 80s running at 1440p or even hotter. But the fact that temperatures are this low and it's still able to run things pretty smoothly is definitely impressive. So overall, I think we've done what we needed to do as far as the actual gaming test. So now we can go ahead and jump into Cinebench and see what things look like there. Now, one thing I do want to note, especially now that things are cooling down just a bit, is I'm running some antivirus software just to kind of continue testing the system just a bit. But when it comes to this device, I will say I think it's a solid gaming setup and could perform well in 1440p if you're willing to sacrifice a couple of settings here and there during extended periods. So for short bursts like what we were just doing, it was performing fine, and it could potentially perform very well long term. However, if you're wanting to do everything on high settings, you could potentially be pushing it to its limit a bit, especially considering we're not running with anything but some relatively stock cooling systems. So we really just have those two big fans in the front. It doesn't have the best ventilation, so this is a glass panel, so the ventilation is really just here, what's on the bottom, this side panel here, which to be honest doesn't offer much. So overall, and then obviously what's coming out the back. So I do think that it would be a solid 1440p setup for the majority of games at decent frame rates. I'm really impressed just with the value for money for this device, but definitely think it could blow most 1080p games out of the water. So let's go ahead and jump into Cinebench. So we have Cinebench pulled up over here, but what we are going to be doing is just wanted to walk through and show the lighting. Even though we made some modifications, the lights do actually sync up for all four fans. So we can change all the colors and even the auto modes, where it looks like this one's actually spinning in reverse, unfortunately, but not a huge deal. And we can make all these different changes, so can set up fans to do really whatever. But what we're going to do now is I have Cinebench pulled up, so rather than trying to do any kind of screen recording, I'm just going to keep the camera on. So we're going to do the CPU multi-core test, so we're just going to click Start here. I did check the thermals on the CPU using NZXT, so they have the OpenCam software, and it basically was just showing temps around, I believe it was 38 to 40 degrees or so when it was at idle. So everything seems to be going pretty well as far as the new CPU coolers going. So we're basically just going to wait and see how this test performs, and then we will try to do the same with the single core. But you'll see we do have the system specs. So we have the Intel iCore, or the Intel Core i7 4790. So we have 4 cores, 8 threads at 3.6 gigahertz. We have Windows 10 Pro, and then we do have that the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 970 SSC as the graphics card. So at this point, just going to wait on all this to load and then see what those metrics look like so that you can see how everything is working and running. So we'll just let this run right now. And then I will pull up the results once it's done. So I stopped at around the 12-minute mark. Now, I haven't done any modifications or anything to this, so we're not overclocking or doing anything like that, just running the system as default. So we have the results right here, but we'll see the specs up top, the results down here. I was going to do it in single core, but since this is really going to be for gaming, it really only makes sense to be doing it in the multi-core. So you'll see right here we have the rendering, 4,317 points, 4 cores, 8 threads, 3.6 gigahertz. So all the specs right there. And then just basically giving a quick overview again of the device. So it's booting pretty quickly, and I have all the specs at the beginning, as many of the parts as I can list in the description below, although some of them, since they're purchased from websites like Mercari, you're not going to be able to get an actual items page. But that is the computer overall, so I hope you enjoyed this budget build. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment box below. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll see you all in the next video.